It's so nice that I can just sit and have a chat. I actually really like that. It's so much better than me being at the back of some hall and just clicking through things. So yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity. It's very interesting at the moment in the university sector. They're finally realising that applied competencies are what the world needs, and that there has been far too little explicit help for educators, and I mean that primary, secondary and tertiary, to actually develop creative competencies within the students and indeed within the staff as well. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself as we sort of trundle our way through this little journey, but you might be surprised to see that as the first slide. And the reason that it's there is that for 60,000 years, our First Nations people have been using social, medical, ecological and STEM-based creativity to not only solve problems, but to survive. And it's only now that we're starting to really realise the deep well that is our Indigenous culture, and how incredibly diverse it is across a whole range of human activities and endeavours. One of which is Indigenous astronomy, and we'll actually be talking about Indigenous astronomy later today, because in fact, in terms of scientific observation, the Indigenous Australians were the first culture that we know on the planet to actually utilise the stars for a whole bunch of functions. It wasn't just for telling horoscopes, I think. Okay. Right, that's my time. Now it's time for you. Okay, there you go. What is it? Have a chat to the person next to you. You've got 60 seconds. Away you go. Someone who comes up with something interesting, talk about it. Away you go. Okay, fantastic. Now, thank you. Now, the reason for asking that is, first of all, no one had nothing to say, right? Yeah, but any group of people I ask that question, they just go hard, because we all have a lot of what we call implicit beliefs. We all think we know what it is. We all think we know whether it is easy or difficult. We all think we may have it or may not, or know people that do. The reason I ask the question is because there's now 72 countries in the world who have explicitly articulated that creative competency should be part of the school curriculum, P to 12. 70 countries in the world. That's quite a lot. First country in the world to do it was Iceland, and I'll explain why a little bit later on, but Australia got on board in 2014. So we weren't the last, but we certainly weren't the first. So, okay, and we'll start off, because I know you're all such positive people. Here's the bad news. Okay, so that's crystal clear, isn't it? You can all read. I don't need to read. Okay, you can read. Okay. Anyone like to agree or disagree with any of those dot points? It's a bit fuzzy. Can you focus it a little? Yeah. Oh, you had it and then it went. Cool. It's like an eye test. Okay. Anyone got anything to say about 1, 2, or 3? True, false? Don't have an opinion. What do you think? Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I want to speak specifically to 1, 2, or 3, but I think that even when we do have some kind of framework, it's actually where that framework is engaged with. Does that make sense? So with the Australian curriculum, we've got the critical and creative thinking, progression. It's there, but it's not a mandated part of the curriculum. It's very well hidden.
Oh, Cara, I think it is. Sorry. We're going to have fun. That's because they tell you the what, but they don't tell you the how. And they sort of vaguely mention the why. But anyway, we'll get on to that. But it's interesting that these are the things that I come across all the time. And that's why today you won't feel like that at the end, which is kind of important for me. So, okay. And this is what's interesting. This is the OECD in 2022. These are the PISA people with the famous testing and all that sort of stuff. That's them in 2022, and they started it in 2000. So why 22 years after they started it, they don't have it? We need to discuss why. Okay, I'll give you some more bad news now. So that's what it's like being a teacher in a classroom, okay? Content, standardised testing, fads and trends, all that sort of stuff. Quality of PD, we're going to talk a lot about that, because in my view, the quality of PD offered throughout the country is pretty poor, generally speaking, in that it doesn't actually meet teachers where they are, which is in their subject, in their classroom. There's a lot of generic stuff, and a lot of creativity stuff in particular is treated as a generic thing, whereas it's not. It's like saying that maths isn't a subject. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. So, okay, that was all the bad news. Now the good news, really good. School does not kill creativity. Of course, I'm talking about the bomb that was dropped by Ken Robinson in 2006. He was a provocateur. I think it got a lot of traction. It was the most viewed TED Talk and all that stuff. How helpful for teachers? Not at all. Because it's fine to say that, but then do something about it. If schools do, then you must follow through that, yeah? So, let's talk about the real stuff. We know that schools don't do creativity. The creativity measurements around the world show that there are many, many teachers in many, many countries who are doing a good job at it. Secondly, and this is probably the most important finding in the last few years, creativity has a significant impact on academic results up to and including. So the research in Australia shows that there are certain attitudes and skills of creativity that has a positive impact on NAPLAN, and more importantly, a positive impact on ATAR. Up to around 10 to 15% of the final ATAR grade is actually determined by kids' creative competencies and attitudes. That's a big number. And it's very important that we know that, because it means then when we target it, we know there's going to be a tangible result. And this is a lot of trouble that I get in with people. It's the creativity stuff. What happens to their marks? Well, I'll show you what happens to their marks a bit later on. Okay, it can be taught, it can be learned, and it can be assessed. That's me quoting myself, but you don't mind that. Okay. This is the important thing. So this goes back to the conversation I asked you to have at the beginning. What do you think it is? So we did a study of about 3,500 teachers around the world, and this is what they said. It's essential. In other words, it's important in education. It's technical, which means being creative in maths is being creative in maths, and being creative in cricket is being creative in cricket. It's recognisable, which means you can see it, you can measure it, you can test it. They know, but not quite sure how, so we get to that. It's universal, it's on all subjects. We know that absolutely for certain. But also, it's unexceptional, which means it's not that some students are and some students aren't. And that's really, really important to know. And if you think about your own families, if you're at home, there are some people who are more creative in some areas than others, and you just kind of accept it. You know, it's important to think about that as well, and we'll talk about some private life stuff. So, that then moves into the work that I do, which is creative actions. Now, the choice of title is really, really deliberate. I didn't want to have the word creativity in the book. Title, why not? Why not? Why would I not have done that? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's another creativity book. Creative actions though, no. That's actually doing something about it. And the interesting thing is, and this is what today is about, it's showing you how to integrate creative competencies with content. It shows you how to integrate it into testing. It's not a fad or a trend, and I'll explain about that in a little while. I can't help you with your changing responsibilities, but you're teachers, you'll get on with it. Hopefully the quality of PD today will be something that you're really happy to have experienced. it does allow for differentiation, which I think is really, really important. And I'll give you a personal story about that now. It reminded me what Karen said. I had a meeting this morning at SACE, and they said to me, what about the low achieving kids? I said, okay. So much of this work is actually about relationships. So there was a student that I had in my previous role at Geelong Grammar School. He was one of those kids who was always outside playing cricket rather than inside doing study, and a bit of a lad around the place and all that kind of stuff. And his marks were sitting at around that sort of 40% mark, which in year 12 isn't a good thing. So I had a chat with him and discovered, in fact, that what had happened at the end of year 11, his parents had separated. And so his ability to remember any content from year 11 was severely compromised because he'd been in a really tough emotional situation. And so I said to him, okay, so we'll just go to the second half of year 11 and we'll start there. He said, are you allowed to do that? I said, it's not me, it's you. You're the one who's got to do the exams. And he was so relieved that I was actually willing to go back and spend a bit of time. And that relational side of things, and it wasn't that he was naughty or not bright or whatever. He'd just been through a tough time with his family, and it needed someone to recognise that and to then come up with some individual strategies for that particular student. So in the same way that Karen's realised that with her connection, it's the same for me. And so we then move on to what I call a community of creative practice. And that's really, really important, because there's another thing that doesn't happen enough, for my view, in schools or in universities. There's not enough sharing of the good stuff. There's not enough of people saying, what is it that you do well that gets great results? How can I be the same? There's nowhere near enough of that. So now I said I'd tell you a little bit about me. So in 2015, you've heard of Geelong Grammar School, I would imagine. Best known for positive education. But they discovered that having had positive education for 7 years, their academic results hadn't changed one bit. And the kids apparently felt great, although I would question that. But it didn't do anything else. And they made a really silly mistake. They didn't actually measure the baseline levels of well-being before they introduced it. So they had no pre-test for their post-test. Oops. Yeah, you can't say you're doing something if you can't show that you've done it. It's a bit tricky. So they then believed that creativity in education was going to be the next big thing. They couldn't find someone around the world that had a model that they could pay $2 million to plug into the system. So they paid me considerably less than that to actually come up with a framework of creative education. So I spent 2 years doing what I call PhD 2. I spent 2 years professionally developing the 200 staff, and I spent 2 years embedding it in every subject, P to 12, for 200 teachers, including assessment in all subjects. So that was fun, and not always, but mostly fun. And so as a result of that particular framework was acknowledged as one of the leading 10 innovations in education in Victoria by the 100 organisation in Finland. That's a big deal, because that's recognition at the international level. And what they liked about it mostly was that it was the subject specificity of the framework. That was the thing that they liked the most. Now, it's not just me. For those of you who are from UniSA, you may recognise David Cropley. He's Professor of Engineering at UniSA. Him and I are great partners. And James Kaufman, who, if you're interested in creativity literature at all, he is the world's leading expert, absolutely no question. And when I first contacted them very early in my time at Geelong Grammar, they both said, thank God a school is willing to do this properly. They don't want, and this is the thing they said to me in my job interview, we don't want creativity just add water. We actually want a sustainable change to the education system that operates throughout our school, and that's what we want you to do. So that then led me to this. So creativity is in fact an ecosystem that operates And you'll see me use this diagram a few times today, it's quite important. Number one at the bottom, domain knowledge or subject knowledge. If you don't know anything about maths, you cannot be creative with maths. If you don't know anything about music, you cannot be creative with music. And if, like me, you don't know anything about golf, you cannot be creative when you are playing golf. I know. And the good thing is about my golf, I acknowledge that it's crap. And I accept my measure of success is losing less than 8 balls in a round, which is my personal measure of creative competency. And it's because I can't be bothered having lessons. I just don't care enough. I'm happy to lose the balls, and I've got a son who goes and finds them anyway. So that's quite nice. But, okay, so domain knowledge, absolutely essential. If you don't know stuff in the subject, you may as well not bother. Okay, let's start with here. So the environment is both social and physical, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go on. Dispositions are what we call the attitudes or the attributes of creativity. Openness to new experience, being curious, taking risks, tolerance for ambiguity, resilience, all of those things. And the thing is, each of those can be taught within your subject area, within a class, and measured and assessed. But that's how you have to do it. You have to do it in little bits. And you do a little bit quite often, and it makes change. It's not Creativity Tuesdays. That's just ridiculous. Processes down the bottom. Processes are what you would normally, or a lot of people think of, oh yeah, that's brainstorming, and that's, let's do a brainstorm with post-it notes and wonder why it doesn't work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the processes and exactly how creative processes should work. There are many, many, many ways to generate ideas, not just brainstorming. There are many, many, many ways, actually most importantly, to record the ideas. This is often where people fall down with that sort of stuff. The last two things, outcomes is very important, because if the outcome is that as a teacher you used open-ended questioning with your Year 8 music class, and you got more answers to questions than you did the class before, that is an outcome. And you can be happy with that. An assessment is quite different. An assessment is, we were looking for new, relevant and useful ideas from students when it came to discovering a new type of pop music they hadn't seen before. And we give them a grade on that and that sort of stuff. But the whole thing kind of works together. But before we even get there, we probably have to know about this, which is really, really important. So you mentioned the ACARA, the developmental trajectory. The door's open, but it doesn't matter. Can I tell you, they made it up. I wish I could say that, and I have to say, and I know this because I apologise if there's anyone here from ACARA. Anyone from ACARA? I actually... Oh, good. X is great. So, no. So what I did was, you would appreciate this then. So I did a really dumb thing. I rang them up and I said, I've just looked at your developmental trajectory of critical and creative thinking. Can you please show me the research? Sorry, what was that?
They would have said no.
They would.
It doesn't share research. I know what the answer is.
You know what the answer is. Isn't it good that you don't think I'm making this stuff up?
Oh, I know, it's true.
And isn't it disappointing?
I had to give the same answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the arts.
Yeah, it's
We did use research.
Yep.
But we weren't allowed to say what research we used.
Why?
Blah, 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 reasons I don't understand.
Global best practice didn't resonate? No. And this is the thing. I wasn't joking when I said I did PhD too. Like that wasn't a joke. 2 years of researching the field globally was a serious amount of work to do, and probably a significantly bigger investment than a lot of places that have come up with stuff. So let's start with the whole thing, which is there is no such thing as a developmental trajectory of creativity in all subjects available anywhere in the world. It doesn't exist, except it does. And where it exists is in the classroom. So I'll only point to you once, Sue, because I can say, when I work with Sue, because I know Sue, if I said to Sue, when she's teaching grade 4 students maths, does she know a creative student in grade 4 maths? And Sue would say, of course. Because she knows, because she's the bloody teacher. And my aim with this long term is to actually get as many Sues as I can from around the place to actually share, so that we know what's a reasonable expectation. Because apparently we can measure their maths and their English and all that kind of stuff.
There is no standardised measuring, and the data that's collected has nothing to do with creativity.
Correct.
And there lies the problem. So we
Correct.
need everyone to kind of push.
So hopefully you'll feel there are a bit more solutions after this little chat today. So the thing is, and this is where the model of creativity development most used is probably the 4C framework by James Kaufman and Ron Bigetto. It starts with mini C. Now mini C creativity is essentially babies and young children, where everything is brand new. Everything is new. And the day that you learn to tie your shoelaces in 2 different ways, when you're 4 years old or 5 years old, is a creative achievement for you. And so that's mini C creativity. And in fact, that's my golf. It's at that really basic level. Little c creativity is what happens when you get to school, which means you do something and you get some feedback and some instruction. And that then enables you to make some more creative choices. And as your subject and skills, knowledge and skills develop, so does your creative capacities as well. So the example that I give here is that this child has brought home their first drawing from school, and 2 things happen. And look, this could be a kid playing music, this could be a kid playing sport, this could be a kid who's into maths, this could be a kid who's into science experiments. It kind of doesn't matter. I've just chosen an arts example because we're here with some arts people. So they bring home their first drawing, and as you can see, it is indeed a wonderful piece of work. But their parents do 2 things. First of all, they put it on the fridge. So what does that do for the kid? What does it do? Yeah, it validates what they're doing. Yeah, it actually gives them a form of feedback. It gives them explicit feedback. And then the parents say, you know what? I think I'd like to get you a drawing book. And thank goodness these parents don't get them colour by numbers. They actually get them sketches that they can do and stuff like that. So, but we're still looking at little c creativity. And so what happens is, so this is an example here. This is actually a year 12 piece of art from Victoria's top arts kids. It's pretty good. It was done during COVID, which I think you can see if you look at it. I think there were a lot of birthdays that we lost in COVID. But that's still only little c creativity. Because the next level of creativity, and this is the one where you people all come in, is pro C creativity, professional creativity, which is what teachers do all day, every day. They know what it is, they know how to teach it, they know how to give feedback on it, and so that student then decides that they would actually like to pursue art for a career. And and hopefully the teacher has given them a whole bunch of art theories and schools to look at. They've got them to experience art in a whole range of different media. They've got their work critically evaluated by people who aren't just their parents, and they've sort of moved things on. But I want to make this really clear. Mini C and little c is what the kids are doing, pro C is what you're doing. Now then everyone says, but what about Picasso? So look, there he is. This is one of the myths that people talk about with creativity. This is the big C, and I'll quote James Kaufman, if you're still famous 100 years after you're dead, we might start talking about it. Because there are paradigm shifters like Picasso, like Mozart, like Einstein. But unless that student who started with the picture on the fridge is still being talked about as a paradigm shifter 100 years later, forget it. And it's all well and good to, like I'm watching Djokovic play in the tennis at the moment. He just destroyed Dimonor last night because he is an absolute pro C creative. Is he a big C creative? Well, I don't know. He's only as good as Nadal and Federer at the moment. So it's interesting that, you know, the longevity of these things. So please don't worry about that. Worry about this. So we're back to maths again. Remember I said I was going to jump around. Okay, so this is one way of teaching young children maths, and it's using multiple representations. So you want to work out something that's 10, you can do a picture, you can do it on a tape diagram, you can do it on a number line, you can do it as a mathematical equation. All of those are a significantly correct solution to the problem that was posed, and each of them are creative for the kid who came up with it. And in fact, if a kid could come up with all four, then you would say that that child had some creative capacity in the field of mathematics. And if they didn't come up with those, then as a teacher you could say, did you know there's another couple of ways to do that? Why don't we try doing those? So it's not saying, oh, you didn't come up with it, it's saying this is what you can come up with, and away you go. So it's really important that you build their subject knowledge and skills alongside their creativity. That's really, really important. Yep. Okay. I'm just going to remind you of the ecosystem. We'll keep going back. Oh, look, another question for you. I'll give you a clue. I never asked. Yeah. There's no obvious answer. What do you think a lot of people say? Right. Yeah, okay. So what's my question going to be? Why? Why?
What's the teacher engage in learning as opposed to being passive learning?
Ah, so it
could be a really active conversation.
But it seems to be directed by one teacher because it's not engaged like the other 20th century learning. What are you trying to teach them?
Is it because of the new technologies that are in the right? Like there's laptops there, the equipment looks a little bit more fancy, but technically the students are all still sitting in chairs, still heads down. Like some are talking to the teacher. There's not really that much of a difference.
It's a mix of skills that are required, like obviously the teacher presenting information, but there is the right-hand side, it's about...
You just gave the right answer. Yeah. Yeah, no, I heard you. I was listening to you as well, but I was also, you gave the right answer. What's the right answer? There is no answer. It depends. Okay, and it depends on my favourite word that starts with C, and that is context. Everything you learn at school or at university happens within a context. And there are times when this is necessary, and there are times when this is necessary. I love the schools that have gone all wheelie chair and then wondered why they just have broken wheelie chairs. Anyway.
Because they're really good.
Because they're really good. Thank you. Very good. And see, we have creativity and humour. I would say that was mini C creativity, but okay. So the thing is, it depends on the context. So okay. Time for you to have a bit of a chat. I'm going to read these out because they're a bit tricky to see. Right, physically, organisation of space, we looked at that. The context of the lesson, very important. The physical resources, at the meeting with SACE today, they use the word affordances a lot. so I started using the word affordances a lot, and but that just means resources. And also the size of groups in collaboration. The size of groups in collaboration. The size of, oh, who are the two SACE people that are here, by the way? Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, hi.
Hello.
No, affordances, part of the talk in the room, at the office? Lots of affordances? Great. Please tell me if I'm using SACE inappropriate language, and I will change it immediately. That's okay, very good. And also the size of groups in collaboration. That's really, really important. There's also the psychological facets, what we call the social learning environment. Psychological safety is a term that you often hear with well-being, but you really hear with creativity. It's absolutely essential in creativity. Kids have got to feel that they can make offers. They've got to feel that they can put their hand up and ask a question, and that you will make them feel respected in their response, and that the students in the class will also feel the same way. So I'm not going the full well-being process, but if you want a creative environment, it's very important. Constraints. Creativity thrives within constraints. It's not free-range learning, yeah? Active listening, back to what Karen said. Feedback, back to the parents on the fridge. And also the personal resources or affordances of teachers and kids and parents. So just have a chat with the person next to you about one of those things, and if you find it easy or difficult in the classroom, I'll give you another minute while you go. We're a new all good?
Great. Smiling. 4:23.
Yeah, I'll be done.
Yeah?
Easy, yeah.
So when do you think we'll have a break?
About 10 minutes.
Cool.
Yeah, it's when the cartoon's on. You thought I was joking?
You want more water?
In the break, after the break. Thank you. Okie dokie, thank you. Would anyone like to just share? Would anyone like to share just briefly something that they found interesting? Something that they found interesting or useful from someone?
Made a really good point.
Thanks, Beth.
The organisation of space is really critical, and sometimes when you're trying, if you're teaching a creative arts subject,
Yep.
but you are in a computer room, and
Okay. Yep.
that physical restraint of the room sometimes doesn't allow you
Yep.
to teach the way you would like.
Okay, and so my response to that, as someone who taught in the portables at Geelong Grammar School, don't even ask. Teaching in a portable, which was predominantly for maths, and when I got to Geelong Grammar, I said, I want to teach what you think is the least creative subject in the school. So they gave me religious education. How stupid were they? Like, what a wonderful subject to be creative with. But the interesting thing was, I always taught in the maths portables. And so essentially what I would do, and once again, this might help you with the arts work, I would have 4 sort of mini whiteboards with a blue tack on the back. I turned it to a 360 classroom. I took things so the students could do what they wanted. And at the start of the class, I said to the students, here's the content and skills for today. What seating plan do you think you would learn best in? And after about 4 lessons, they really got it. And they would come in and I'd say, this is what we're doing today. They'd say, oh, okay, so that's probably groups of around 4. Let's do that. I want to have that side of the room. I want to have that side of the room. And essentially, I would make it my own space. And once again, I talk a lot about this stuff. It's about incremental change for incremental gain. So if you find a way to make that an art space by using your Pro C creativity, whenever the kids go into it, because of how it's sorted out, they'll be fine. And I think it's much easier for then, when the boss walks past, to go, wow, you're really using that room effectively, rather than, oh my God, I'm hearing back from the whingers who don't have their own room again. You know, I'm not saying that's what you do, but it's often in schools, you know, the squeaky wheels tend to get what they want. But no, just do it yourself. And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. So let's see how this all works, because it's really, really important. So this is the book. It's got 41 lesson plans from 23 countries. So once again, I was asked this question at SACE today. It was a really good question. How did you choose what got in the book? Peer-reviewed academic journal article written by a teacher. That was it. I wasn't interested in professors. I also wasn't interested in the Norwood Geography Teachers Community Society of Lessons, or Twinkle, or Pinterest, or Teachers Pay Teachers, because the sort of people who put that stuff up don't necessarily have evidence for what they do. And so my fundamental belief is that there is more than enough research. So creativity has been a science since when? It's a science, it's a psychological science. When was creativity first called a science? (1960). 1960. There was work on it, but it wasn't called for in education for the first time as what we call creativity in education, 1960s. So it's been around for a long time. You know, 60 years it's been around. So I thought that I could find the evidence, and I was really lucky to discover there are teachers everywhere doing great things. So in the lessons that are in the book, the first thing is what the teacher found. There's a quote. So the teacher did this and they found this. Now that's really good for you to know. The other thing too is they're only ever one page, right? The second thing is, what is the component? Now a component of creativity is the process, the dispositions. The facets lie within that. So within the dispositions, there's openness to new experience, tolerance for ambiguity, those sorts of kinds of things, yeah? And is it teaching with, for, or about creativity? I'm about to talk to you about that. And also, what was the purpose of the lesson? What were the subject knowledge and skills the teacher wanted them to know? Because you have to do that in every class, because that's what you do. And secondly, what was the purpose of the lesson in terms of creativity? Now you won't be able to read this one, it's just for me to show you how they sort of look in the book. So this one here, so this is maths, lower secondary from Singapore. We suggest that teachers do well in being more deliberate in designing for thinking spaces within formal teaching time and scaffolding students towards strategic planning and reflection of their learning behaviours. So, and to do that collectively. So that's very much along what we were just talking about with that environment. Here's some people in Singapore who actually did that in maths. And the method they used, they gave students a problem that they'd never had to solve before with an incomplete solution. So every group of kids got a third of a solution, and then they then had to work out what they did as a group. So that's an example of that. Okay, so I mentioned teaching with creativity. So, teaching with creativity, we're back to a bit of the myth stuff, which worries me a bit. If we're being creative, it's got to be about fun. Higher level maths is, well, look, you know what? For some people it is fun. You know, I've got a maths daughter who's just all over it, you know what I mean? And I've got a son who's into photography who feels exactly the same as my daughter feels about maths. That's fine. Does it have to be about digital tech? This is the other thing too. Certainly COVID revealed a lot of those problems. Is it about games? So can I tell you, please don't gamify education anymore. Please, please, please. Sometimes maybe a little bit, but really, you know. And is it about teaching science through dance? That's always the thing, you know. You're not going to make the chemistry teachers do interpretive dance of molecules, are you? Unless they're a really good dancer. But that's right. That's not a joke, that's right. If they are, and they can use their body to explore the relationships between carbon atoms and oxygen atoms, go right ahead. But not if you're not confident and comfortable with it yourself. Okay. You have to actually have a look at yourself and see what you are comfortable with. And see where you want to stretch your creative boundaries as well. And it's beyond digital, I think, you know what I mean? There's so many other ways to teach. This comes back to what I heard on this side of the room. It's about devising situations where students' creativity can flourish. This was the discussion about the environment before. A flamboyant and showy teacher might be creative in themselves. We won't mention drama teachers, but fail. Oh, Karen, nice to see you. Nice to see you. But fail to give the students enough space for the students to develop their own ideas. Yep, we've all seen that. By contrast, someone who's more subdued and questioning might foster a secure and stimulating environment. So, what type are you? Don't answer that one, that's just for you to think about within yourself as an individual. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'll be honest, like not all drama teachers are flamboyant extroverts. Not all 50-year-old male maths teachers are introverts with dandruff. You know what I mean? Although many of them are. Okay. Okay. Now, that's teaching with creativity. Teaching with creativity is you being creative with your pedagogies. Yeah? That's what that's about. Teaching for creativity, it's not about free range. Once again, it's not about digital technology, and it's also not just about problem solving. It's about developing the competencies within the kids. Yeah? You need a drink in a minute, so I'm going to not give you time to discuss. Okay, this is what I think it is. It's using the right tool in the right context, we're back to the C word, to develop students' creative capacities alongside subject and knowledge and skills. And it might be worth you thinking about what are some creative tools that you've used in the classroom, and I'll give you some in a minute. Okay. That one, how are we going for time? Do you want to have a break now? Or do you want to do another 5?
Keep going.
Keep going, cool, okay. This is really important, and then you'll get a break. Okay, so the dispositions of creativity. This is the big, for me, certainly in my experience at Geelong Grammar School and other schools I've worked with belong, this is the missing part of the puzzle. There's far too much attention paid to the mechanics of it, not enough paid to the dispositions. And what I've done here, I explain what they are, but also I'm actually giving you the academic evidence that underpins this. So once again, there are plenty of studies now about all of these things that I've been able to look at to know which ones really do make a difference. Okay, openness to new experience. There's 2 types. One is the sort of sensation-seeking side of things, and the other is actually people who actually are open to new experience just through intellect. And it's possible to be both. You know what I mean? I love water slides. I love reading academic journal articles, so I'm a bit of both.
At the same time?
Only if the journal article has been laminated. That's right. It's that guy again with the laminated things. Okay, can I say openness, NAPLAN and ATAR, very strong positive relationship, and we can measure openness very, very easily. Very strong relationship between that and academic achievement, which is really interesting because you think it's a lot about the sort of nitty-gritty perfectionistic. Nope. Persistence and resilience. Now that's sort of not in the sort of pos-ed sense. It's the ability to try multiple solutions and not get too stressed about it, that kind of thing. And also to continue working after you've had what might be negative feedback, right? This is really interesting. Higher levels of persistence means you've got higher levels of original ideas. In other words, you've all heard the term cognitive load. Yeah, the harder you think, the more you work, that kind of thing. And not only that, cognitive flexibility. So persistence and resilience equal flexibility of thinking, which is something that we need a lot more of, yeah? Next one, who can see the rabbit and who can see the duck? Okay. It's nice, isn't it? Cute. Tolerance for ambiguity is really, really important. I just finished reading a fascinating study on ambiguity in environmental science in Canada, where the students in year 11 were actually looking at the fact that two groups of scientists came up with different findings based on the same data, which was a really interesting thing, and how data can be ambiguous. In terms of the workplace, people are screaming out for people who can do that. Yeah. Now, in terms of schools, very important here, and for universities, I have to say, low tolerance for ambiguity are more likely to believe fake news. That's not good. No, it's serious. That's a serious problem. Yeah, very serious about that one. Okay. That person there, what are they thinking?
I'm curious and I'm wanting to know more.
Yeah, or?
I'm sure the answer's right.
Yeah, that's right.
They've had their hand up.
Or I've had my hand up for, that's right. So that's right, that's the dandruff. Okay, so one photo, three possible solutions, all of which may be correct. So intellectual risk-taking. It's about sharing your ideas with peers, which is why the psychological safety stuff is really, really important. And the confidence has to happen with the teacher, but also with the students in the class. Okay, I'm going to move past that one. Okay, I told you I had one for you. Put this on today. Okay, I love the idea as a music teacher coming up with a model called PIMS. That was deliberate choice on my part, I have to say. The psychologist didn't like it, but I said there is not a music teacher alive who doesn't like a PIMS. So this is actually a method of teaching studio music. Now this is a very good example of teaching with creativity. And so it's actually called positive instructions in music studios. And for those of you, how many music teachers in the room? 3, 2, great. Art teachers, the same. Drama teachers? Cool, this works really well in drama as well. Great, okay. Positive priming, I actually say to the student, tell me something good that happened in your musical world this week before the lesson. First question, tell me something good that's happened for you in terms of music. Don't care what it is. Could be a new band, could be something you saw, could be out on TV, don't really care. Step 2 and step 1 is actually getting them to start with a piece of music that they want to play. How do most music lessons start? Kill me now. Get up your instrument and start doing scales. And it's like, oh my God, just kill me now. So what I do, I actually say to students, whether this is drama or whether this is music or whether this is indeed visual arts, because the same thing works, start with something that you'd like to do that you think would help you be engaged with the lesson. It's astonishing what they come up with. And often really their level of engagement, that transition, that entry point into a lesson happens so much faster because they've got a bit of autonomy in the choice. Second thing is what I call asset-based feedback, not deficit-based feedback. Now, we had a lovely discussion last night about we think that education standards are dropping significantly. This is a really good way for that not to happen, because you say, I really liked your fingering on bars 36 to 42, but I did notice that from bars 43 to 46, your finger slipped a little bit. Can we have a look at that, please? I'm just presuming that you're a violinist. That's a much better way to do it than saying, you just got those bars wrong with your fingering, fix it. And it doesn't sound like a lot. I had 26 staff that we actually developed this and embedded this across a whole school. And the level of engagement and student retention went up significantly. The other thing there is to actually do with active listening, which is what you talked about before. So the dispositions we'll talk a little bit later. Oh look, it's time for a drink. Away you go. I'll play the cartoon when you come back. Go and have a drink, come back in a minute. Don't have any sound, but I don't think it matters because I was trying to look at something just to give people a bit of a brain break, and I just love this. So I'll just let you watch it quietly. You all know what's going to happen, but that's okay. Please play. Why is that not playing? There we go.
How did he just
It's a great example of creativity, isn't it? It's just perfect.
Well, it never goes his way, so what does that say in the end?
I'm going to explain to you why.
Persistence.
Yeah.
It's not about the end result. Yeah, exactly. You feel, but he wasn't, he didn't mind failures.
I love Wile E. Coyote, but let me explain a little bit behind it. I'm not going to go into too much detail. In order for that to work, the creator of Wile E. Coyote came up with 9 rules for Wile E. Coyote. And the only way that would work was if they followed the 9 rules, one of which was the coyote could stop any time if he were not a fanatic. A fanatic is someone who redoubles their efforts when he has forgotten his aim. Okay? Which reminds me of a lot of STEM-based problem solving that happens in schools. So, and the other constraint is all materials must be obtained from the Acme Corporation. I love that. So that's just a little brain break for you. Okay. Like any good theatre, you had the long first act and you get a shorter second act, just to let you know. Okay. With a cartoon in between. See? And snacks. What more can I offer? Okay, and wine. There you go. Not for me yet. But, okay. So, the creative processes. This is the kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about. I would suggest you spend more time on the dispositions, but I may as well give you this stuff because it's what everyone wants anyway. Consistent evidence that problem solving in schools is inefficient and ineffective, primarily because of the attitudes. The main thing is the students have got to understand each stage of the creative process. So I'll give you an example here. This is what I call a typical school thing, right? Design and make a boomerang. And I call it problem-based, project-based, design thinking, experiential learning. I don't really care. That was part of a really robust conversation today with the people at SACE earlier on. And for you guys to think about too, because you're here, is that every school uses their own language of teaching and learning. Some of which is ACARA, some of which is SACE, some of which is what they do themselves. And it's so important to be really, really open to the language people are using. For me, being open and flexible is really important. And if someone wants to call it, A instead of B, I don't really mind. So here's the thing. What's the first thing you notice about that boomerang?
It's not a boomerang.
It is indeed a boomerang. No.
It's made in China.
Okay. I'd like to pay my respects to the Yidinji people near Cairns in northern Queensland who in fact use this particular type of boomerang. It's actually a training tool for young men because it's easier to throw than the standard boomerang. And they actually use it. I talked about Indigenous STEM. It's a great example of Indigenous engineering because they've worked out that that's a lot easier to throw and get back than it is one of the bigger ones. So, but if you look at this, right, so you say to the kids, go and make a boomerang. Let's actually look at what they should be doing. Designing, selecting materials. They're then going to learn how to shape, scrape, sand and drill and tie. Do they use traditional Indigenous resources? Yes or no? All of that stuff. Then do they paint it? Yes or no? If they do, where do they find Indigenous ochre? It's not in every part of the country, in case you didn't know. And then they've got to practice throwing it, and then they've got to get feedback. So no wonder we turn out with things that aren't too good. The main thing is people spend too much time doing the whole process. Certainly my experience says that you actually need to teach each part of the process explicitly. I believe a lot in what I call light and tight education, which means 5 minutes explicit, 10 minutes experiencing, and then you go on to the rest of the lesson. So if you're going to do some creative stuff, put a bit of time aside, but it doesn't really need to be a lot. And like I said, it's not Problem Solving Tuesday or anything like that. So here's the process. It's relatively simple. Understand the problem, generate some ideas, evaluate some ideas, develop the final solution, validate it, and then present it. Except that's missing one really, really important thing. And I mentioned it about 20 minutes ago. What's missing and what do people often do really badly in the problem solving process? I said post-it notes. It's how they record the ideas.
They do it well in SAS though, because it's a requirement.
Right.
Particularly in visual art design.
Yep.
That the whole process is recorded with learning, with personal summary.
But what are the tools? That they use to record it?
Multiple.
Okay.
Multimodal. Yeah.
Which is excellent, and it's the first time I've heard that people are doing
It does
that.
depend on the teacher.
Of course. Of course.
And it's important also to really identify what the problem is.
Yes.
From a teaching perspective, I can jump in and say, design a chair rather than saying, well, we explore ways in which you can support the weight of a person or something like that.
Yeah, all of those, and that's why understanding the problem is important. But even how you actually generate the ideas. So I've got 3 little tiny examples there. Mind mapping, which I presume you've heard of. Concept mapping you've heard of.
Yep.
Fishbone diagrams. Okay, I'll show you one. Brainstorming, lots of types. Who's heard of synectics? Okay, do you want to tell us about synectics?
We use it.
So tell us the subject, because that would help a lot.
Well, it's sorry, I've lost it now for a minute. No, sorry.
Okay. Synectics is actually problem solving through the use of analogies. It's often used in engineering subjects. It's very good in STEM. Good for design stuff. Scamper. Everyone heard of Scamper? Anyone not heard of Scamper? Yeah, interesting. Scamper, often used in primary schools, but actually has fantastic application in senior school. Good thing is, in the book. Okay, and then the evaluation tools of critical thinking, also trialing, prototyping and testing. If you don't know what a fishbone diagram is, that's what a fishbone diagram looks like. So, my daughter is 14, she loves scoring goals in netball. I said to her, I'm going to teach you this thing called a fishbone diagram. I want you to draw one that will help you score more goals on the weekend. And this is what she came up with. And I actually spoke to her about variables. She said, I do variables in maths. I said, yeah, but you've got variables in netball too. She said, really? I said, yeah, what are they? So once again, it was another way of, and look, I don't pin my children to a table and get them to do creative stuff. on Saturday mornings, it's Saturday afternoons. But no. But so these are the things that make you be efficient as a goal scorer. So if you're going to solve a problem, you need to look at the variables that are actually involved. And fishbone diagrams is just one particular example of that. Okay. Another way of measuring things is to look at, this is a typical measure of divergent thinking. So fluency is the number of ideas, flexibility is the different categories of ideas, and originality is how unique that idea is within that particular group of children. Question for you. One of those three is an absolute rock solid predictor of ATAR and NAPLAN. Which one is it? Fluency, flexibility, or originality?
Flexibility.
It's flexibility every day of the week. It's not originality.
No, that's just
Yeah.
that comes.
It does. It does, absolutely. And this is why you know a creative response from kids if you see them. You know what I mean? That's Scamper, by the way. So if you've got something, then you can substitute, adapt, modify, put to another use, combine, eliminate, reverse. It's really good as a design tool. Here's something that Scamper was used for. Yeah, I love that. So this is, I'm doing a big research project at the moment at a primary school in Canberra. We're looking at a 2-year process of increasing mathematical and English creativity in a primary school in Canberra over a 2-year process. We started with actually something called loose parts play, which does anyone know about that? What is loose parts play? What's the most obvious loose parts play? Come on, Hamish. Lego. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, the kids had to use this loose parts thing to come up with an object that represented a story. Okay, what's the story that they came up with? No.
She's got a broken something.
Yes?
She's a transport.
No? No, but that's good.
Like a book story.
No, it's an X-ray machine. Yeah. So she's got a broken leg and she's used, and see the thing on the top with the 3 holes? They're the special glasses to stop the person who's taking the X-ray getting radiation. That's grade 4. So if you trust them, you can do it. Okay, you mentioned chairs. Rank them in order of creativity and justify your thinking. You have 45 seconds. Go. Rank them in order of creativity. Okay. What's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? Tell me the answer. Come on. It depends on the context. Thank you. It depends on the... Yeah, that's right.
Why is there a bunch of a tape measure? Because you're ranking.
I don't... Yeah, because you're raking them between 1, 2 or 3. Can I stop having trick questions? No, because I want you to realise that this stuff is actually so much easier than you think. Right? If I said to you, how creative is that in terms of comfort? It's probably easier. How creative is that in terms of ecologically sustainable materials? Different question. What's that like in terms of stackability? Creativity in terms of stackability? Those sorts of things. Cost. I mean, the variables then come into play, and we're back to our fishbone diagram. So all of these things, you can see now they're starting to all sort of link together. Question?
I was just going to say that I think the only way you could make a judgment there is you just can't make a judgment on that end product. The judgment comes from viewing what the process that they went through to get to that end point.
But I didn't give you that.
No.
I didn't give you that. But I've just tried to show you throughout this afternoon that people tend to jump in and they have an opinion, which is usually an implied belief, as I said. Okay, we're almost done. So, how do we assess creativity? Well, today's been all about components and facets, so guess what? That's what you're going to do. So if you're looking at assessing just recording ideas, look at the students who recorded the ideas the best, and you can stop it there. You don't actually have to have a whole process. Today we're going to look at how to record ideas. Now, it was interesting today speaking to, I'm referring back to the SACE conversation, A, because you're there, but B, because it was really helpful for me. They said to me, how does this stuff fit with year 11 and 12? That was the question, really. And the answer is that being a creative, independent learner is what you must be in year 11 and 12. And that's why, if you've got 5 different ways to record ideas, when you're studying, you choose the method of recording ideas that suits you best. There are some people who like to have pictures, some people who like to have videos, some people who like to have highlighted text. I don't care, provided it works for you. There was one student who, I've got a little memory technique that I use for remembering important dates. And for this student, it was their journey on the bus to school, and they were doing the events that led to the French Revolution. And McDonald's was the storming of the Bastille. I never forget that image, because they'd look out the window on the way to school and they'd actually associate something on their... So as soon as they sat down for their exam, they didn't write anything, they actually drew their journey to school. And they actually filled in the dots and then went on and did the exam. That's a really neat little example of creativity that you can do very, very easily. So formative assessment, summative assessment, of course. Also, there's a big move now towards peer and self-assessment. Peer and self-assessment for creativity, super duper important. Apologies to the drama teachers for this one. This is actually a rubric used by a drama department to assess students' drama. Can I just move on? Like, it's just so complicated. How could you possibly do all of those variables for one kid doing a monologue? I mean, it's just, move on. Okay, you're better off having something as simple as this. So, this is a rubric for observing the attitudes of collaboration. That's all it's doing. That's it. So the kids are doing a collaborative task. I don't care what subject. Let's say it's a science experiment, okay? And all you do is you go around the room and you have a look at what the kids are doing. Are they sharing their knowledge? Are they sharing their resources? You know what it's like? Are they respecting each other's views and opinions? Now, I actually have an odd way of teaching. I give kids the rubric and then I tell them what we're going to do. So I would actually say we are working on collaboration in the development of the Islamic faith and the split between Sunnis and Shiites. That's a creative topic that I was doing with my Year 10 religious education people. And I said, you're going to do a presentation, a collaborative presentation, but this is the process we're going to go through. And so they had the rubric with them, and you could see if someone was stuffing around, someone would say, look, it says you've got to stay focused. Or would you please share that idea? These little tiny things are actually really, really easy to do. Here's another one. This is a self-assessment, which students do. This is something that I'm using as young as grade 4. The environment was suited to my needs. So thanks for coming. Have a nice afternoon. No, that's all right. No worries. My pleasure. See you later. I had all the resources. I felt safe. I often get students to do this anonymously. And if they don't feel safe, then we have a conversation about that. Once again, it's a very short, I had all the attitudes I needed. Oh, and you get kids who over time go, actually, you know what? I'm really not very persistent, am I? No. How can you become more persistent? Or I then say, where are you persistent in your life? and you find that they're out the back kicking a football for an hour and a half every afternoon. Okay, we need to sort of bring that in. And here's the last one for this. I have the following questions about these components or facets of creativity. Write them down and ask the teacher, and I think I could improve my creativity by. Now, once again, you don't use these all the time. They're fairly infrequently used. But once again, they're just little tiny things. So if you look at the presentation today, I have given you so many different little tiny examples that you can use. You'll remember some, you won't remember others, that's fine. But I just want to finish with this because it's really important. We're back to the Indigenous. Now, what I didn't show you was the inside of that astronomy star wheel. And I've got some here if you're interested in them. This was first published in 1996 for the first NAIDOC week. And it's a collaboration between an Indigenous elder who got permission from nations around the country to tell one story that are on this, because we were trying to come up with something that went from January to December. And what's really fascinating is that if you look at this, the Indigenous inhabitants of Australia and all Indigenous tribes, nations use this. They didn't use exactly the same images, but they used the night sky. Biology, astronomy, environmental science, so in other words, when food sources are available, when to do burnings, those sorts of things. Chemistry, how to make antibacterial soap, there's a really good example from Northern Queensland. Physics and engineering, we've got the boomerangs. Genetics. So what was interesting, Indigenous people knew that inbreeding was bad. They worked that out really, really early on. And the only way to prevent inbreeding is to meet with other groups. And of course, they were often over large distances. So they would actually have a 5-year plan to actually meet and interact with other Indigenous groups to keep diversity in the genetic material. Like, that's an amazing realisation to come to in order for you to survive. And of course, climatology and mapping, and 50,000 years, I mean, it just blows me away that that's what Indigenous people are doing. And it's why when I do a lot of teaching now in Indigenous STEM, because it's really hitting the mark in education at the moment as a cross-curriculum priority. It's also the idea of Indigenous creativity, I think, is quite compelling. And it also forces students to rethink their lens about those things. So I'm just going to finish up there. So once again, going back to the book, 41 examples, 23 countries. You can do your creative future as you wish. Thank you very much for your time today.